Hi, welcome to Virtual CB1A. This is Miss Rena, and for today's video discussion, we are going to start with basic trigonometric identities. So we are already in the next chapter entitled Identities, and we will start with the basic trigonometric identities. But before we discuss the things written in this box, we are going to review some of the things that we discussed from the previous chapters muna. If you still remember angles in standard position, so say for example, we have, of course, this is the initial side, the positive x-axis, and then we have the terminal side. For example, ito yung terminal side niya. Yan. And this terminal side contains a point xy. Siyempre, line siya. So, pwede naman siyang i-extend indefinitely on both direction, right? But say, for example, we chose this point as one point on the terminal side. So, this point xy. We don't know the exact coordinate of this xy. So, from this point xy, we can draw a line perpendicular to the x-axis. So, ito yung line natin perpendicular to the x-axis. Or baguhin natin yung baguhin natin yung kulay para mas visible siya. Yan. Now, our task for trigonometric identities is to find the different trigonometric functions that can be substituted for one another. So, halimbawa, ito yung angle in standard position natin. We have angle theta. So, how can we find the trigonometric function value of this angle theta? So, remember that if we have a certain length for our terminal side, we can take that length and then find other angles with the same length for the terminal side. Halimbawa ito. Yan. So if we have a lot of angles having the same length for the terminal side, we can now generate a circle. And from this circle, since this is the center, yung origin natin, and this is a point on the circle, then we will denote this as r or the radius. Okay? So meron na tayong mga values or elements na pwedeng gamitin to find the trigonometric function values of our angle theta. Specifically for sine theta, since this is equal to opposite over the hypotenuse, and we follow the property that from the point xy on the terminal side, you will draw a line perpendicular to the x-axis. Ibig sabihin, ito ay 90 degrees. So, you are going to have a right triangle. If we are finding the trigonometric function value for the sine theta, the opposite will be equal to the height of your triangle, which is equal to yung total na length niya from the center or the origin up to the point y. So, the opposite is equal to y. So, for sine theta, this is equal to opposite y. And then, for the hypotenuse, syempre, yun yung opposite ng right angle or yung pinakamahabang side. And the longest side is the radius r. So, our sine theta is equal to y over r. How about cosine theta? Si cosine theta, adjacent over hypotenuse naman siya, di ba? So, we have adjacent over the hypotenuse. And what is adjacent? Theta. Ang kalapit ni theta ay yung length na to. Yung nasakop niya sa x-axis. Or simply, the length of x from origin to the point x. So this is cosine theta is equal to x over r. And finally, for tangent theta, that is opposite over adjacent. Tangent theta will be equal to opposite niya is y and adjacent niya is r. So we have tangent theta is equal to y over r. So ito lang yung mga properties na sinusunod natin. Or ito lang yung mga formula na ginagamit natin if our angles are plotted in the Cartesian coordinate plane. Just wait a moment. Charge lang ako. Okay, let's continue. So, discuss na natin yung mga laman ng basic trigonometric identities natin na nandito. So, si cosecant theta, that is equal to 1 over sine theta raw. Why is that so? So, si cosecant theta, if you still remember, oops, lagay lang ako ng panibagong sheet. So, this is sine theta, cosine theta, and tangent theta. Tapos, dito sa kalapit nila, lagay natin yung mga reciprocals. So, cosecant theta, secant theta, and cotangent theta. This is y over r, x over r, and y over x. Ito naman, cosecant theta, this is hypotenuse over opposite or r over y. Secant theta is adjacent over the hypotenuse, which is, or hypotenuse over adjacent. Reciprocal nitong cosecant theta, we have r over x. And finally, for cotangent theta, we have x over y, adjacent over opposite. So, paano nangyari that cosecant theta is equal to r over y? So, cosecant theta is equal to 1 over r over y. Or, teka, mali. 1 over y over r. And this is going to give us 1 times, parenthesis na lang natin, the reciprocal of the denominator or r over y. Kaya tayo nagkaroon dito ng r over y. And since y over r is equal to sine theta, we have 1 over sine theta here. So, cosecant theta is equal to 1 over sine theta. So, reciprocals lang naman sila. So, 1 over their reciprocal. Okay? So, 1 over sine theta for cosecant theta, 1 over cosine theta for secant theta, and 1 over tangent theta for cotangent theta. Now, what do we have to take note when getting these reciprocals? So, 1 over sine theta. Meron tayong condition that lagyan na natin dito if and only if sine theta is not equal to 0. Bakit dapat hindi equal sa 0 si sine theta? Don't forget that division by 0 is undefined. So, kapag pinlog in yan sa calculator, halimbawa, 2 divided by 0, you will end up with a math error. So, wala siyang sagot. Therefore, for cosecant theta, this is only valid if your sine theta is not equal to 0. And vice versa. Kung ito ay equal sa 1 over cosecant theta, then your your sine theta shouldn't be equal to 0 as well. Okay? So, ito ay cosine theta. So, if and only if cosine theta is not equal to 0. And finally, for cotangent theta, we have 1 over tangent theta. So, if and only if tangent theta is not equal to 0. So, yan yung mga conditions natin. So, yun din yung mga nakalagay dito. So, for tangent theta, it should be defined and not equal to 0. When will it be defined? So, minsan kasi asymptotic tayo with the tangent graph. So, dapat meron kang value ng tangent theta at si tangent theta mismo ay hindi 0. Minsan kasi si tangent theta pwede siyang maging undefined. Kailan siya pwede maging undefined? If, di ba, y over x siya. Si tangent theta, pwede yung maging undefined if your sine or cosine, either one of them is 0. Ganun din dito sa cotangent. So, dito sa tangent, if your adjacent is 0, si cosine is 0, undefined na si tangent. Si cotangent naman, kapag si sine ay 0, hindi na rin siya defined. So, undefined na rin siya. So, you have to be sure that for the tangent theta, it is defined and not equal to 0. So, ganun din dito sa iba pang mga reciprocals natin. There is a possibility that they will not be defined in the first place. Kapag kasi sine or si cosine, yun lang naman mahalaga si x at si y. Pag either kay x at kay y ay, 0. Si R, hindi naman yan nagzi-0. Kasi kahit na halimbawa, nagkaroon tayo ng 0. Kailan nagkakaroon ng 0? Halimbawa, 0 yung measurement ng angle natin. This is still valid. So, meron ka pa ring x, which is equal to any value of x, which is also equal to r. So, si r, sinusundan lang niya yung value nung length niya dun sa quadrant kung saan nag-fall yung ating angle. So, kapag ka-quadrantal angles, dun tayo nagkakaroon ng mga value na 0 for y or x. But your r will follow the measurement of the non-zero coordinate. So, kapag nandito siya, halimbawa 360 or 0, the value of r will be the same as the value of your x. Paano kung nandito naman siya, 90 degrees yung angle mo? So, sine 90, if you are going to check for the value of it, it is 1. Ito, cosine 0 o kaya cosine 360. This is equal to 1 as well. And your r will be equal to 1 pa rin. Dito naman si sine 90, sabi ko nga, ang value niya ay, kahit iba to, kahit na y niya ay 3 or anything, basta sine 90 siya, it will be equal to 1. And your r will be equal to 1 as well. Ipa-follow lang niya kung ano yung trigonometric function value nung angle kung saan siya, nung quadrant kung saan siya nag-fall. So, kung y siya, edi sine yon. Kung x siya, cosine yon. Okay? Sa 180, edi dito, cosine 180 degrees, this is negative 1. So, ang r niya, yun lang yung kaibahan niya. Ang r niya ay magiging the same as your cosine 180. Or, absolute value siya nung trigonometric function value. Since we are talking about distance, wala siyang magnitude, wala siyang direction, this will be equal to 1. Okay? So, ipa-follow lang niya yung absolute value of the trigonometric function value wherein it exists. Hindi siya 0. So, yun yung ibig sabihin dito nung mga defined and not defined. Kasi may chances tayo that cotangent theta, since ilalim nito ay tangent theta and there is a possibility that tangent theta will be undefined, Then, ang condition niya, it should be defined and not equal to 0. Dito naman, 1 over cosecant theta. Si cosecant theta, since siya ay r over y, may chances tayo na si y ay maging 0. So, ang condition niya, it should be defined and not equal to 0. Dapat si cosecant theta ay defined and not equal to 0. There are chances that cosecant theta is undefined. Ano example ng chances na cosecant theta ay undefined? Ito, sine 0 is equal to 0, right? Because sine 0 is equal to y, 0 si y, over the radius r, which is equal to 0. Pag kinuha mo yung cosecant niyan, cosecant theta, babaligtarin mo siya, this is 1. 1 over 0 siya, so hindi siya defined. Ayan. Minsan ginagamit natin na symbol dun sa mga cellphones, ang lumalabas pag nag-division ka ng 0 ay itong infinite na sign. Dun sa ibang calculator naman, math error. So, para simple, kasi wala na tayong space, ginawa ko na lang siyang infinity. Ayan. So, there are chances wherein cosecant, secant, and cotangent are undefined. So, we included the property here that it should be defined. Medyo mahaba yung discussion ko. Pero yun lang yung pinopoint out ko. So, notice that each of these equations is true for all angles theta for which both sides of the equations are defined. Such equations are called identities. Ayan. And in this section, we will discuss several trigonometric identities. That is, identities involving the trigonometric functions. These identities are often used to simplify complicated expressions or equations. For example, one of the most useful trigonometric identities is the following. So, tangent theta is equal to sine theta over cosine theta when cosine theta is not equal to 0. Now, why is this tangent theta equal to sine theta over cosine theta? Now, let's talk about unit circle. Kanina, indefinite tayo dun sa location ni x at ni y, 'di ba? But this time, mas maging definite tayo dun sa location nila. Pag sinabi nating unit, edi 1, 'di ba? So, lagay lang ako dito ng mga tools. Palakihin natin siya. Ayusin ko lang yung Cartesian plane. Just wait a moment. Okay, so I prepared here. I prepared here a Cartesian plane na ang mga values lang natin ay negative 1/2, 1, tsaka 3 over 2. O kaya 1/2, 1, 3 over 2. Yan. Pinaliit ko yung mga, or pinalaki ko yung mga intervals nila for here. Ayan. So, what we're going to do is to have a terminal side which is just equal to 1. So, na-discuss na natin before that no matter how much you extend your terminal side for a certain angle in standard position, you will always end up with the same trigonometric function, di ba? Ganon din sa mga similar na triangles. So, kung meron kang triangle na merong measurement na 3, 4, 5, yung measurement niya dito ng theta, the same dun sa angle similar to it, or triangle similar to it, having the same angles inside. So, halimbawa, ito ay 9, 12, 15. Yung measurement nung angle theta mo dito, tapos tawagin natin tong alpha. So, the trigonometric function value sine theta is the same as the trigonometric functions of sine alpha. So, kahit na ano, yung mga measurement nung mga sides nila, kahit na gano'n yan kaliit or gano'n yan kalaki, as long as they have the same measurements for the angle, hindi nagbabago yung trigonometric function values. So, what if, doon na lang tayo sa pinakasimple. Doon tayo sa may terminal side na ang length lang ay 1. So, kung ang length ng terminal side natin ay 1, ibig sabihin, ang radius niya lagi ay 1. 'Di ba? Gawa tayo dito ng circle. Yan. So, kung ito, yung ating chosen na xy, x and y, ito yung point natin in the circle, and through it, meron tayong angle and standard position. Himbawa ito. So, the measurement of r will also be equal to 1. So, kung ano yung measurement dito, ito, itong part na to, at saka ito, yan. Lahat yan radius kasi lahat sila point on the circle. So, the radius is equal to 1. And of course, the opposite will be y, and the adjacent will be x. So, mas masisimplify yung mga trigonometric function values natin. Kung meron kang unit circle, ang sine theta mo na lang, imbis na y over r, ay magiging y over 1, or simply y. So, sine theta, equal na lang siya sa y. Ganon din si cosine theta. Instead of x over r, it will be simplified into x over 1, which is just x. And finally, for tangent theta, it is opposite y over x na lang. Okay? Okay. So, since sine theta is equal to y, or the opposite, and cosine theta is equal to x, or the adjacent, si tangent theta na opposite over adjacent will be simplified into y over x, or yung identity natin na nandito sa baba, ito, tangent theta, ang sine ay equal kay y. So, sine theta over cosine theta. Ganyan lang yun kasimple. So, dun galing yung principle natin that tangent theta is equal to sine theta over the cosine theta. Okay? Ayan. Ito na pala. Nakalagay din pala dito. But, magkaiba kami ng proving. Ang ginamit ko yung, ginamit ko yung idea of the unit circle. But if you're going to follow this one, you will start with sine theta over cosine theta. You will end up with the same value, which is tangent theta. Okay, ano pa yung iba nating mga importanteng trigonometric identities? So, kung si tangent theta ay sine theta over cosine theta, edi si cotangent theta pala ay equal sa pinagbaligtad na tangent, nireciprocal natin na tangent. So, we have cosine theta over sine theta. Ayan. When sine theta is not equal to 0. Now, ano pa yung mga importanteng ideas natin when it comes to the trigonometric function values. So, dito, gumamit ulit tayo ng quadrants. Using the distance formula, lagay ko lang siya dito. Teka. Meron tayong isang ginamit kanina eh. Ito, yan. Balikan natin to. Tapos, kakopy ko siya. Dito tayo sa page 2. Okay. Burahin ko lang to. Kasi de-derive naman natin yun dun sa distance. Yes, pwedeng tumingin na lang kayo sa chart, pero hindi nyo maiintindihan ng maayos. Pwede ang tingnan nyo na lang itong mga to itong mga box. Pero hindi nyo sila maiintindihan kung hindi natin i-discuss kung saan sila nanggaling. So, dun sa mga dati nating formulas na ginagamit, halos di ko pinapakita, di ba? Bihira or selected topics lang yung pinapakita ko yung proof. But this time, for identities, it is important that you know where the values came from, where the formula came from. Hindi pwedeng basta-basta na lang tayo gumagamit ng mga equation. Okay. So, bakit ko ito kinopya? Kanina meron tayong R, radius, which is unknown. So, how can we find the value of this unknown? So, sabi natin, generated siya from angle in standard position. So, kapag sinabi natin angle in standard position, the initial side is from the positive x-axis and the center is located at the origin or the vertex of the angle is at the origin. So, ibig sabihin, itong point natin dito, ayan, meron tayong segment from 0, 0 to an unknown location xy. So, how can we find the value of r? Using the distance formula, meron tayong distance is equal to the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. Diba? Ngayon, kung kukunin natin yung distance na r from these 2 points, you will be left with x minus 0, tapos i-square mo siya, plus y minus 0, tapos i-square mo siya. So, r is equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. Ayun, ito na siya. So, r is equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. This is from the Pythagorean theorem, which is also applied in the distance formula. So, for example, ang nakalagay natin dito, your angle is in quadrant 3, pero dun sa example ko, the angle is in quadrant 2. Ang radius naman natin, hindi yan, or ang distance natin between the 2 points, hindi yan magiging negative. So, laging positive yung distance or laging positive si radius. So, the same argument holds if theta is in other quadrants or on either axis. Thus, we have r squared is equal to x squared plus y squared. So, lagi silang parehas. So, paano natin ito magagawang x squared, y squared? So, just square both sides. We have r squared is equal to x squared plus y squared. Yan. Ito na yung formula natin. So, dividing both sides of the equation by y squared, we can do, since r is greater than 0, hindi naman siya pwedeng maging 0, sabi ko nga kanina, because even if your adjacent side or the opposite side will be equal to 0, your r will still be greater than 0 kasi susundin niya yung value or yung length nung non-zero na part. Hindi naman pwede na 0, 0 parehas si x at si y kasi wala ka ng angle pagka ganon. Point na lang siya. Wala kang angle. So, dito, divide natin both sides. By r squared. Then, we will have 1 is equal to, ayan. So, itong dalawang to, sundin natin yung reverse ng addition property of equality. You will end up with, addition property of equality. Addition of fraction. Kabalik na rin siya ng addition of fraction, wherein if you have the same denominator, you copy the denominator and you add the numerator. So, i-break down natin siya into 2. Parehas sila ng denominator r squared. And then, the operation is addition. Ayan. So, what do we know about x squared over r squared? pwede mo rin tong gawing x over r squared. Because x over r times x over r is equal to x squared over r squared. So, pwede mo yung gawing ganyan. X over r squared. Dito sa kabila, we have y over r, tapos squared ulit. What do we know about x over r? X over r is sine theta, di ba? So, sine theta, tapos may square tayo dito. Nakasquare siya na ganyan. Plus cosine theta. Ay, teka, mali. Baligtad. Inuna ko si y. Unahin pala natin si cosine. Cosine theta squared plus sine theta squared. Yan. Now, paano tayo nag-square ng trigonometric functions? So, pagka nagsusulat tayo ng squared na trigonometric functions, ganito natin siya sinusulat. Papaliitin ko lang tong part na to para may space tayo. Yan. Basa pa, di ba? Basa pa yan. Okay, this is written as cosine, tapos immediate dun sa cosine yung squared. And then, si theta, yan, yung angle natin, nandito siya sa labas. So, ang ini-square mo lang ay si cosine squared. Pero, cosine theta squared to. Ang pagsusulat lang kasi niya in notation ay ganito. Immediate after nung trigonometric function value. Tapos nasa labas yung angle. Plus sine squared theta. Ang ibig lang sabihin nito, dalawang beses mo or naka-raise to 2 yung sine theta mo. Ngayon, ba't ko siya sinulat kanina na sine muna bago cosine? Kasi on most books, laging inuuna si sine. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta. Yan, kaya ako nalito kanina. So, lagi yung ganito isinusulat. Sine theta muna before cosine theta. And then, pagbaligta rin natin yung dalawang side. Sine squared theta over cosine squared theta is equal to 1. Okay. Okay. So, dito galing yung nandito sa ating box. Ayan. Dito sa book nakalagay cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta. But on some books, you will find that sine squared theta muna yung nasa unahan. Ewan ko, ganun yung traditional na pagsusulat dun sa ibang mga books. Laging una si sine before the cosine. Now, you can think of this as sort of a trigonometric variant of the Pythagorean theorem. So, syempre, if you are given with 1 and cosine squared theta, hanapin mo si sine squared theta, edi using addition property of equality, subtract mo si cosine squared theta from both sides, you will end up with sine squared theta is equal to 1 over cosine squared theta. Tapos, si cosine squared theta naman ay 1 minus sine squared theta. And, kung ang hanap mo lang ay si sine theta, sige natin siya dito. We have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. So, sine squared theta is equal to 1 minus cosine squared theta, right? If you're only looking for sine theta, and you know the value of your cosine theta, extract the square root from both sides, you will end up with sine theta is equal to the square root of 1 minus cosine squared theta. So, dito yun ang galing. Ganun din yung principle na gagamitin for the other one. So, kapag kasi cosine theta naman yung nawawala. Okay? So also from the inequalities, we have um, sine theta is greater than or equal to -1 but less than 1. Less than or equal to 1. Hindi ka pwede magkaroon ng trigonometric function value na sine that is greater than 1 or less than -1. Laging in between lang siya ng dalawang number. Ganon din kay cosine. Hindi ka rin pwede magkaroon ng trigonometric function value na 2 o kaya -3. Lagi lang siyang between -1 to 1. Okay? So, the above inequality, baka magtanong pala, bakit? Bakit ganun, ma'am? So, di ba ito? Yan. Ano yung rule natin sa radicals? So, if you have the square root of n, your n should be greater than or equal to 0 lang. Bakit greater than or equal to 0? Subukan nyo kumuha ng calculator, tapos naka-computation mode lang siya. Subukan nyo kunin si square root of -4, o kaya si square root of -1, o kaya si square root of -100. You will always end up with math error. So, kung ang division rule ang rule natin sa division kanina ay division by 0 is not possible. Dito naman, extracting the roots of a negative number is not possible. So, kung meron ka ditong sine theta, hindi pwedeng ang kanyang value dito sa loob ng square root. So, we have here 1 minus x. Halimbawa, 1 minus x lang siya. This is unknown. Ito yung unknown natin, si cosine theta. Ginawa ko na lang siyang x kasi meron din tayong cosine theta is equal to, yung kabaligtaran nito, 1 minus sine squared theta. So, in general na lang, we have one minus x. So, when will 1 minus x be equal to 0? So, negative x is equal to 0 minus 1. Negative x is equal to -1. Divide both sides by -1, x is equal to 1. So, kapag ka meron kang 1 dito, for the value of x, magkakaroon ka ng 0. Okay? Another thing, paano kung naka-x squared na siya? Kasi meron tayo ditong squaring function. Meron tayong cosine squared theta at saka sine squared theta. So, hindi na siya ganito kasimple na 1 minus x is equal to 0. This will now be written as the square root of 1 minus x squared. Kasi naka-square yung mga function natin. Cosine and sine. So, when will 1 minus x squared be equal to 0? Kasi yun na yung less na value na pwede niyang i-take. Kapag ka less than 0, undefined na yon. Okay? So, to make this even clearer, so when will we have 1 minus x squared ay greater than or equal to 0? Yan. Para mas malinaw. Ang pwede lang nating i-count na value ay from 0 pataas. So, we will have here negative x squared is equal to 0 minus 1. Same pa rin. And then we have negative x squared is equal to -1. Multiply both sides by -1. You will end up with x squared is equal to 1. Now, what is the square root of x squared? It is x. And we have two values, positive and negative 1. So, magkakaroon tayo ng divisions. So, ang x squared na 1 minus x squared must be greater than or equal to 0 will give you the values of x must be greater than or equal to positive, negative 1. So, positive 1 yung isa niyang value, negative 1 yung isa pa. So, yung interval of numbers natin from negative 1, 0, at saka 1, sa algebra to inaaral, madidivide yung mga numbers natin into 3 intervals. Yung isa ay from negative infinity, papunta dito kay negative 1. Since pwede i-include si negative 1, we are going to have the closed interval. Negative infinity to negative 1, yung una nating interval, and then yung isa ay negative 1 to positive 1. Tapos yung isa ay from positive 1 to positive infinity. Ngayon, paano natin malalaman yung mga valid na values to be substituted to our x? Ayan. So, magtetest lang tayo using this equation. Let's choose a value between negative infinity to negative 1. Kapag kapasok siya dito, sa equation natin dito, then the whole interval will be counted. Let's choose from negative infinity to negative 1. Piliin natin si negative 9. Wala lang. Gusto ko lang. Halimbawa, ang test value natin ay x is equal to negative 9. Let's substitute negative 9 to x squared. So, we have 1 minus negative 9 squared is greater than or equal to 0. 1 minus the square of negative 9 is 81. So, is this true or false? We have 1 minus, meron kang negative 80. Is this greater than or equal to 0? No, this is false. Therefore, itong buong interval na ito ay x na, hindi na siya kasali. Now, let's try this second interval here. Second interval natin, we have 1, negative 1 to 1. Ano yung gusto natin gamitin? Anything na between negative 1 and 1. Gamitin natin si 1/2. Okay? Kasi between siya ng negative 1 and 1. We have 1 minus 1/2 squared is greater than or equal to 0. We have 1 minus 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. Yan. Is greater than or equal to 0. 1 minus 1/4 is ilan ito? So, we have 4 minus 1, we have 3 over 4. So, 3 over 4, is this greater than or equal to 0? Yes, it satisfies the equation. This is true. So, kung true siya, kasali tong interval na to. Now, dito tayo sa pangatlong interval. We have 1 and anything na greater than 1. So, to infinity tayo. Gamitin natin si x is equal to 15. Halimbawa, 15. Wala, magi-square, maliit na lang. 5 na lang, 5. Yan. Para madaling mag-compute. We have here 1 minus 5 squared is equal to 0. We have 1 minus 25 is greater than or equal to 0. We have negative 24 is greater than or equal to 0. Is this true or false? It is false. So, meaning, itong buong interval na to ay hindi kasali. So, for both Sine and cosine, for both x, the values that it can only take are the values between -1 and 1. So, ang x natin dito kanina, general ko na lang, it can pertain to both sine and cosine. So, -1 to +1, in between lang ang pwedeng value na i-take ni cosine. And for, ni sine, and for cosine, ganun din. In between lang din siya ng -1 to 1. Okay. So, dito yun ang galing. So, the above inequalities are not identities since they are not equations, but they provide useful checks on calculations. Recall that we derived those inequalities from the definitions of sine and cosine in section 1.4. Ngayon, in formula 3.3, dividing both sides of the identities by cosine theta gives us, may bago tayo dito, mga equations. We have tangent theta is equal to sine theta over cosine theta, and secant theta is equal to 1 over cosine theta. May bago tayong identity. We have 1 plus tangent theta is equal to secant squared theta. Nasusundan ba kung ba't ito naging ganito? Or parang feeling ko kailangan ko siya ipakita. So, we have cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is equal to 1. Yan. I-divide natin both sides by cosine squared theta. Okay, cosine squared theta over cosine squared theta, 1 na lang yung matitira. So, we have 1 plus, dito, sa kabila, we have sine squared theta over cosine squared theta. And finally, dito sa dulo, we have 1 over cosine squared theta. We can write this as sine theta over cosine theta na naka-square. Tapos ito, 1 over cosine theta na naka-square din. Ano yung alam natin about sine theta and cosine theta? This is equal to tangent theta. Siyempre, nandyan pa rin yung squaring function. And 1 over cosine theta is equal to secant naman. Ay, mali. This is secant theta. And syempre, naka-square pa rin siya. So, we have 1 plus tangent squared theta is equal to secant squared theta. So, dito yun galing. Okay? Ganon din dito sa kabila, ang i-divide mo naman ay si sine theta. You will end up with cotangent theta plus 1 and cosecant squared theta. Okay? Okay. Now, apply na tayo. Meron tayo isa ditong example. You have to simplify using the trigonometric functions identities that we've discussed earlier. Ayun. Yan. Simplify cosine theta tangent squared theta. So, this is equal to, so cosine theta squared plus tangent squared theta. So, we know that tangent squared theta is equal to sine squared theta over cosine squared theta, right? The operation between them is multiplication. So, what do you notice about the numerator here and the denominator here? They are equal, di ba? So, equal na lang sila sa 1. You will be left with just sine squared theta. So, this one is equal to this, sine squared theta. Okay? Ganun lang siya kasimple. Dali lang. Okay, dito tayo sa kabila. Okay, we have to simplify 5 sine squared theta and 4 cosine squared theta. Okay. So, 5 sine squared theta plus dito sa kabila, we have 4. Saan equal si cosecant, ay si cosine squared theta? So, si cosine squared theta ay equal sa 1 minus sine squared theta. Galing siya dito. Nasaan ba yun? Ayan, galing siya dito. Ito. Okay? Okay. Now, what we're going to do is to apply distributive property of equality. So, kung tandaan nyo pa yung distributive property of equality natin, ay, sorry, hindi nga pala dito yung distributive property of equality. Sa ano nga pala yun? Sa geometry. Yan. Sorry. Pero, gagamitin din natin siya sa trigonometry. We have to distribute 4 onto both numbers inside the parentheses, both terms. So, we have 5 sine squared theta plus 4 minus 4 sine squared theta. So, ano na mangyayari dito? We have 5 minus 4. So, kaparehas lang din yan nung ano natin, nung rules natin sa algebra. We are going to combine like terms. They have the same factors dito. Naka-affect sa kanila parehas ay yung, say for example, variable na x. We have sine squared theta for x. So, simplify natin siya. You will be left with sine squared theta na lang because 5 minus 4 is 1 plus 4. Okay? Ayan. So, ito lang yung final na sagot. Ito siya. Okay? Ayan. Now, ito, hindi na tayo basta magsisimplify lang. We are going to prove that the two sides of this equation are equal. So, paano tayo nagagawa ng ganitong klase ng proof? Okay. So, kapag ka magpo-prove ka ng ganito, you will choose the simpler side of the equation. Kung ano yung sa tingin mo mas simple sa kanila. Si tangent theta plus cotangent theta ba on the left side? Or si secant theta, cosecant theta on the right side. So, pili ka kung alin dyan yung gusto mong i-transform papunta dun sa kabila. So, in our case here, hindi naman kasi required na laging yung right-hand side yung binabago. But since the left-hand side looks simpler, we are going to use trigonometric identities in order to arrive with secant theta and cosecant theta on the right-hand side. So, ano si tangent theta? We have sine theta over cosine theta, right? Okay, what do we know about cotangent theta? So, si cotangent theta naman ay equal sa, saan nga siya equal? Sa cosine theta over sine theta. Yan, kabaligtaran naman itong tangent theta. Now, let's try to add them up. So how do we add fractions? So we start with the multiplication of the divisors or denominators. So cosine theta times sine theta. Tapos, we proceed with cross multiplication. Sine theta times sine theta, magkakaroon tayo ng sine squared theta. Tapos dito naman sa kabila, magkakaroon tayo ng cosine squared theta. Now, let's try to separate them into two different tag mo dito, two different terms. So, we have sine theta squared over cosine theta plus cosine squared theta over sine theta. Ay, teka. Nagkamali ako. Ay, tama pala. Tama. Nagkamali nga ako. Kasi, may kasunod pa to sa baba. May sine theta pa siya. Ayan. Tapos dito sa kabila, we have cosine squared theta over cosine squared, denominator, cosine theta, sine theta. Yan. This time, we are going to simplify. Okay. Oo nga, may mali nga ako. Pinapahirap ko siya. Dapat dito pa lang nag-ano na tayo. Ulitin ko. Okay, this time, let's have example 3.3. We have to prove that tangent theta plus cotangent theta is equal to secant theta times cosecant theta. So, the first thing that you have to do is to identify or choose which side is more simple. Kasi itatransform mo yung isang side papunta dun sa kabilang side using the trigonometric identities. Hindi kailangan na laging left-hand side, katulad nung gagawin ko, if you think that it is more simple to transform secant theta, cosecant theta into tangent theta, cotangent theta, you are free to do so. So we have here tangent theta plus cotangent theta. So, saan equal ang tangent theta? We know that this is equal to sine theta over cosine theta. And what about cotangent theta? We know that it is equal to the reciprocal of the tangent theta, which is cosine theta over sine theta. Now, what are we going to do next? We are going to apply what we know about addition of fraction. So, just multiply the denominators. We have cosine theta, sine theta, and then cross multiply. Sine theta times sine theta is sine squared theta. And then for the other one, cosine theta times cosine theta is cosine squared theta. Right? So this is now equal to, okay, saan equal si sine squared theta at saka si cosine squared theta? That is equal to 1. 1 na lang siya. Over cosine theta sine theta. Ngayon, ibukod natin tong dalawang to. Reverse tayo ng multiplication ng fraction. So, if you have 1 over AB, this can be separated into 1 over A times 1 over B, right? So, we can write this as 1 over cosine theta times 1 over sine theta. What is 1 over cosine theta? That is secant theta. What is 1 over sine theta? That is cosecant theta. So, this is how you prove that the two trigonometric identities are equal. Okay? So, I will be cutting the discussion at this point. Masyado na siyang mahaba. So, thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye-bye.